on a special 2-hour 2020. Michael Jackson, Afterlife. The fateful rehearsal just hours before his death.
Michael Jackson is wearing 3 layers of shirts. He was shivering cold in the middle of summer.
And unable to sleep.
Either Murray isn't telling the truth, or someone other than Murray gave Michael Jackson a fatal dose of propofol.
Now, almost bigger in death than he was in life. All new interviews with his inner circle about his earliest days.
I'm not lit properly. This isn't fair.
And his last, literally.
I had to help pick him up and place him in the coffin.
Showing never-seen pictures, finally setting the record straight. And taking us back to the glory days that began it all with Thriller.
He spent the next 25 years of his life, in pursuit of something to match that.
Plus, today's hottest superstars, Usher and Justin Bieber, on what he taught them.
I listened to all those songs, Beat It, Billie Jean.
Tributes and memorials from his final resting place to the place it all began, Gary, Indiana.
I'm sure my son would be very pleased.
Tonight, how the king of pop lived and lives on. Michael Jackson, Afterlife. Here now, Elizabeth Vargas and Chris Cuomo.
Good evening. It was 1 year ago today that Michael Jackson died. While the king of pop has been laid to rest, so many questions about his life and death have not until tonight. Over the next 2 hours, you will hear surprising and very personal details from the people closest to Jackson.
And we'll begin at the end. Minute-by-minute account of Jackson's last critical hours described by the people who were there. It was the eve of what Jackson said would be his final concert tour, a sold-out event that would never get off the ground.
It was billed as the greatest comeback concert of all time, complete with fainting fans, dazzling dance moves, and the songs that were the soundtrack for a generation.
Is it. 10 shows. Starts July 8th.
It would be his first concert in a dozen years. So when Michael Jackson himself arrived in London to announce his comeback on March 5th, no one dreamed that in less than 4 months, the king of pop would never sing again.
I need an ambulance as soon as possible, sir. We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing.
Jackson's sudden, unexpected death on the eve of his concert debut raised suspicions and questions unanswered to this day.
I do believe it was foul play. I do believe that.
They say, why?
If you're looking for clues as to what killed Michael Jackson, you might start here in the behind-the-scenes rehearsal for the movie This Is It, just released on DVD. At first glance, the 50-year-old Jackson appears confident and in control.
I gotta cue that. I gotta cue that. That should trigger on its own.
Oftentimes he'd say, stop, watch me or listen to me. And he'd sing the note that he doesn't hear.
Then run it next to him.
It's not there.
Okay, it should be.
It should be.
And he'd do the step that he didn't see. He was not going to settle. He wouldn't allow any of us to settle. I think that he was happier than he had been in years.
But longtime Jackson associate Brian Oxman says the movie, culled from over 100 hours of rehearsal footage, is heavily edited to make Jackson look stronger than he was.
The reports from the people who surrounded Michael is that he was extremely stressed. He was extremely upset about how the show was going. Take a close look at that movie. Michael Jackson is wearing 3 layers of shirts. The other dancers are all in their bare undershirts. He had chronic bronchitis, and he was anemic. He was shivering cold at the rehearsals in the middle of summer. The closest people to him were very alarmed at what was happening to Michael.
Concert promoter Randy Phillips admits he was worried that Jackson was literally wasting away.
I was concerned about his weight and that he wasn't eating. And I actually brought in someone whose sole job it was to make sure he ate.
And former manager Frank DeLeo knew Jackson was up at all hours of the night.
He said he wasn't sleeping, and I said to him, well, what seems to be the problem? Well, I'm just excited, I'm all wound up.
We saw Michael Jackson deteriorating. We actually saw him more than a couple of times in Beverly Hills going into a doctor's office, and he would come out just out of it.
We love you, Michael. Okay.
TMZ founder Harvey Levin says that while Jackson was rehearsing for This Is It, he would go to the office of his longtime dermatologist, Dr. Arnold Klein, several times a week. And it wasn't just for face work. Jackson reportedly slept in Klein's office, often for hours at a time.
He seemed, just unfocused as he walked out, and it was a little different from walking in, for sure.
Can you still moonwalk, Michael? Why wouldn't I be able to?
It was pretty clear something was wrong.
But Dr. Klein says he saw nothing wrong.
He didn't like a person who was suffering from anorexia. He very muscular, and he was very, very happy and dancing. He danced in the office.
In the 3 months leading up to his concert, Dr. Klein gave Jackson nearly 50 intramuscular injections, often several times a week. The last time, just 3 days before his death.
I've given him medication, yes, but you could take all the medication I gave him in a year right now and nothing would happen to you, okay? I wish I could have been there every minute of the day.
But this doctor was there every night. Dr. Conrad Murray, the Las Vegas cardiologist charged with giving Michael Jackson a full dose of the powerful anesthetic propofol to help him sleep. Jackson had insisted the concert promoters hire Murray to care for him during the tour, paying him nearly $150,000 a month, more than $1 million a year.
He looked me in the eye and he said, look, this is the machine, pointing to his body. This is the machine that fuels this entire business. I need a doctor 24/7. He makes me feel good about myself. I want this doctor. At that point, I said, you got the doctor.
On Easter Sunday, April 12th, before Dr. Murray is hired, registered nurse Sherilyn Lee says she gets a frantic call from Jackson.
He said, find me an anesthesiologist. I don't care how much money they want.
She says he was begging her for propofol so he could sleep. She says she refused, knowing the drug should never be used outside a hospital setting.
I said, you don't want to do this. You might not wake up the next morning. He said, no, my doctor said it's safe.
On Father's Day, June 21st, just 4 days before he died, Lee got another urgent call from Jackson's aide.
And I could hear Michael in the background. Tell her that one side of my body is hot, and one side of my body is cold. It's very cold. And I said, tell him he needs to go to the hospital. Somebody had given him something that hit that central nervous system because, that's all he wanted was to sleep.
The next day, on June 22nd, Dr. Murray told police he tried to wean Jackson from propofol, giving him just 25 milligrams, along with a sedative and anti-anxiety drug. It was enough to put Jackson to sleep. On June 23rd, Murray says he gave Jackson Ativan and Versed, no propofol at all. Again, Jackson fell asleep. The next day, another rehearsal. It would be Jackson's last.
He was so full out and so into the show that night, and the night before that. Those were our best 2 run-throughs of the show.
He was leaving. We had goosebumps. I mean, I saw exultation in the cast and crew.
The show was done, and that goal had been reached. And so he left so excited and ecstatic.
The last time I saw him at 12:30 a.m. in the morning, Thursday morning, he put his arm around me and he said to me in that kind of soft, lilting voice of his, he said, thank you for getting me here. I've got it now. I know I can do this. I'll take it. If you had told me that night that he would be gone the next day, I would have said you're crazy.
Hold for applause, slow fade out.
Coming up, what actually happened the night Michael Jackson died. What eyewitnesses told police.
He observed Michael Jackson on the bed, lying on his back, with his arms extended outward from the body.
That's next. June 25th, 2009, 12:30 a.m. Michael Jackson's black Escalade slips through the gates at his rented mansion near Beverly Hills. He has just finished a full run-through for his concert, This Is It. Exhilarated and exhausted, his trip to London just 8 days away. In his second-floor bedroom, the heat is on high, and there's a fire in the fireplace. Despite the warm weather, he is freezing cold. His personal physician, cardiologist Dr. Conrad Murray, is by his bedside, as he is every night, to help him go to sleep.
That drug was supposed to make him relax and sleep. He didn't wake up.
It wasn't just one drug. A cocktail of drugs were found in Jackson's body. 1:30 a.m., Dr. Murray gives Jackson a 10-milligram tablet of Valium. 2 a.m., he injects Jackson with 2 milligrams of the sedative Ativan. Still no sleep. Around 3 a.m., another injection, 2 milligrams of Versed. 5 a.m., more Ativan. Jackson is still awake. As the sun rises, he repeatedly begs for his milk, a milky white anesthetic called propofol. But Dr. Murray, who says he's trying to wean Jackson off the drug, says he refuses. 7:30 a.m., 2 more milligrams of Versed. Still no sleep. 10:40 a.m., the doctor finally gives in to Jackson's demands. He says he puts half the usual dose, 25 milligrams of propofol, into his IV. Within seconds, the king of pop is finally sound asleep.
Giving this man propofol every night for 6 weeks. It's like playing Russian roulette by putting 6 bullets into 6 chambers of the gun and pulling the trigger.
10:50 a.m. Police say Murray tells them he goes to the bathroom, and when he returns 2 minutes later, Jackson has stopped breathing. But Dr. Murray's attorney, Ed Chernoff, says the police got the time wrong. 11:51 a.m. Cell phone records show that Murray makes a phone call to a friend in Houston. A few minutes into the call, Dr. Murray reportedly drops the phone and can be heard giving CPR.
Doctor rushed over to him, felt his body to see if he was warm. He was. Looked for a pulse, found a weak pulse, and started performing CPR. While he's trying to perform CPR, he's also trying to call 911.
Chernoff says Murray couldn't call 911 because he didn't know the address of the house. 12:12 p.m. Murray sounds the alarm, calling Jackson's personal assistant saying, "Call me right away." Then he runs down the stairs to get help.
I felt that there was some type of a panic, you know, an urgency.
Chef Kai Chase is making lunch in the kitchen.
And you heard Dr. Murray calling for Prince.
The children started crying, and the doctor asked for help. That's when I realized something was not right.
12:17 p.m. Security guard Alberto Alvarez runs upstairs to Jackson's bedroom.
He observed Michael Jackson on the bed, lying on his back, with his arms extended outward from the body. His eyes and mouth were open.
Associated Press reporter Tom Watkins exclusively obtained Alvarez's official statement to police, a minute-by-minute account of the crisis as it unfolded.
Dr. Murray was performing CPR on Michael with one hand. At this point, Paris and Prince walked into the bedroom, and Alberto escorted them out.
Sobbing, the children run back downstairs into Kai Chase's waiting arms.
We stood in a circle and we held hands together. And, you know, we're crying because we don't know. And you feel helpless.
Upon returning to the bedroom, Alberto asked Dr. Murray, "What happened?" Dr. Murray replied, he had a bad reaction.
Alvarez says while Dr. Murray is performing CPR on the bed with one hand, he hands him vials of medicine with the other. Alvarez says Murray instructs him to put them in a bag. Then he points to the propofol.
Dr. Murray then told Alberto to remove one of the IV bags and place it into the blue bag. Alberto stated that the IV bag contained a white substance.
12:21 p.m. Only after that, Alvarez says, does Dr. Murray tell him to call 911.
What is the emergency? We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing. He's unconscious, he's not breathing? Yes, he's not breathing, sir.
Alvarez says he sees no sign of life, but Dr. Murray directs compress Jackson's chest while he attempts mouth-to-mouth. Then, according to Alvarez's statement, a stunning confession.
Dr. Murray then stated to Alberto that this was the first time he ever performed CPR.
12:27 p.m. Within an ambulance and fire truck arrive. ABC paid to license this footage from Ben Evanstad, who runs National Photo Group.
The photographer looked inside and saw on the call screen 50-year-old male not breathing. Then we thought, okay, this is probably Michael.
The paramedics are in the house for 42 minutes.
Dr. Murray was the senior medical person there, and he had the authority to say, I want him taken to the hospital. But the paramedic said, he's dead.
This is Michael Jackson's estate, everyone.
Outside, a busload of tourists, oblivious to the life and death drama unfolding inside.
The bodyguards looked very tense. Something was wrong.
Shortly after 1 p.m., the ambulance begins to move.
So as it was backing out, I told the photographer, put the camera up against the window and get the shot. And that's what he did. It is the most valuable paparazzi photo ever taken.
The ambulance races to the hospital, followed by the children in one Escalade, the bodyguards in another. At the hospital, the bodyguards who protected Jackson in life lash out at those who would intrude upon his privacy in death.
Please, man. It's a private. I know, but it's this big, man.
Michael Jackson is in a coma.
I was at my house in New York, and I get a call. So your brother's been taken to the hospital. It's on CNN right now. Suffered
From cardiac arrest and is now in a coma at the UCLA Medical Center.
I just couldn't believe it. It just didn't ring true to me.
But there was no going back. At the hospital, Jackson's former manager, Frank DeLeo, tells Michael's children their father is gone.
When I came in, I'm sure they just saw it on my face, and they said, say it's not true, and I just said, I'm sorry, but, this has happened.
Hundreds gather outside UCLA Medical Center as word spreads. The King of Pop is dead. 6:45 p.m. Jackson's body is transported by helicopter to the coroner's office for what will be one of the most intense death investigations Hollywood has ever seen. At the center of it all, one question. How did Michael Jackson die? Is Dr. Conrad Murray guilty of killing him? Or did the King of Pop kill himself?
It wasn't an accident. He was murdered.
That's next. He is the man at the center of the Michael Jackson case, charged with involuntary manslaughter for giving the King of Pop a fatal dose of a powerful anesthetic called propofol.
Michael probably been dead a long time before they started taking him to the hospital. That's what made me believe something was wrong.
I want justice. They've taken a life away from us.
At the hospital, police say Dr. Murray doesn't tell emergency room doctors that he gave Jackson propofol. He then leaves the hospital against the objections of investigating officers after refusing to sign the death certificate. His car, parked at Michael Jackson's home, is impounded. Days later, when he finally surfaces and speaks to police, Murray admits for the first time that he gave propofol to Jackson the day he died. But Murray's attorney, Ed Chernoff, says it didn't kill him.
The way he died would not be explained by the medicines that the doctor had prescribed.
But as detectives fan out to search the doctor's offices and pharmacies in Las Vegas and Houston, Dr. Murray goes from personal physician to prime suspect. Authorities link receipts for bottles of propofol he ordered from this pharmacy in Vegas to the bottles found in Jackson's bedroom when he died.
I just thought, my God, who is this guy? And I thought, he must have been this fringe doctor. Turns out he has a practice where these patients love him. And it was almost like, will the real Conrad Murray please stand?
The real Conrad Murray couldn't pay his bills. He had dozens of liens against him, including claims for unpaid child support. So when the concert promoter AEG offered him $150,000 a month to be Michael Jackson's personal physician for his comeback concert, Dr. Murray jumped at the chance. So how did Dr. Conrad Murray become Jackson's live-in concierge physician, a member of his inner circle? They met in Las Vegas in 2006. Jackson was living here when Dr. Murray made his first house call.
He came with good references.
These three bodyguards who protected Jackson for 2 years and are writing a book called In Defense of the King were there when Murray and Jackson first met.
When Murray first came into the picture, he came in for the kids, didn't he?
Correct. The kids had colds, and we couldn't just take Mr. Jackson's kids to a hospital.
So how often would Dr. Murray be brought in?
He might come through maybe once or twice a month just to see how everybody's doing.
He was more like a family doctor.
But over time, they say, Dr. Murray became Michael Jackson's trusted physician and friend, the last person they'd expect to be implicated in his death.
When Dr. Murray's name came up, you weren't like,
Right.
That's the guy.
No,
Guilty.
not at all. Dr. Murray looked like he didn't do anything wrong.
Like he just wanted to help.
And what would help Jackson sleep so he could dance the next day was, in fact, what killed him.
The question really becomes, what did AEG know about Michael Jackson's condition?
Charles Peckham is Dr. Murray's civil attorney. He says his client is not to blame.
In the contract with AEG,
yes,
it says that they will provide Dr. Murray with a CPR machine, saline, needles, a gurney, and other medical equipment.
I will tell you that Dr. Murray was supposed to have been provided a great deal of medical equipment and also a nurse, and that they weren't provided by AEG. They should have been, but they weren't.
In fact, the contract with Murray, dated the day before Jackson died, was never signed. Earlier today, AEG released the following statement to ABC News. The medical supplies in question were requested by Dr. Murray for use specifically in London in the event an unexpected need arose. When asked why these supplies were needed, Dr. Murray said that Michael Jackson was in excellent health, but an artist of his stature should have this equipment on hand when engaging in this type of performance. Dr. Murray did not ask for these items for use in Los Angeles.
If the equipment were at his house to preserve his life, Michael Jackson could have been saved.
On behalf of Michael's father, Joe Jackson, Brian Oxman has filed a wrongful death suit against Dr. Murray and a complaint against AEG with the California Medical Board.
I think that Dr. Murray bears responsibility, but I don't think that his is the only responsibility here.
The autopsy report states the cause of death as acute propofol intoxication, similar to what would be given for major surgery. But remember, Dr. Murray says he only gave Jackson a small dose, 25 milligrams.
There were only two people in the room, Michael Jackson and Conrad Murray. So Conrad Murray's fate seems to lie in the theory that Michael Jackson gave himself the fatal dose.
And that will probably be the defense strategy later this year when Murray goes on trial. The question is, will it be enough to create reasonable doubt?
I have done all I could do. I told the truth, and I have faith the truth will prevail.
For now, Dr. Murray is laying low with an occasional photo op, like this one at Michael Jackson's grave. He says he lost not only a patient, but a friend.
Next, going back to a time before the Troubles began, when a superstar took the stage and the world by storm.
All the things that people sort of thought was eccentric and they didn't like 5 years later, in 1984, all of it was charming.
When we come back.
To understand the enormity of Michael Jackson's career, you have to go back to that electrifying year when all the world was his stage and everything he touched turned to gold. It was in the glow of Thriller, the best and perhaps the worst thing that ever happened to him, because he would spend the next 25 years trying to match that success. Here's Chris Conley.
As the Jacksons' Victory Tour kicked off in Kansas City in June of 1984, Michael Jackson was not only the hottest celebrity on the planet.
He's gorgeous!
What do you look like?
Good! Dark and handsome!
But he had also spent the previous 15 months atop a peak of success, fame, and public admiration that no other entertainer has reached since. Setting fashion and style trends.
Whatever Mike says, go.
Kicking it with the president.
Michael, please give some TLC to the PYTs. Now, I know that sounds a little off the wall, but you know what I mean.
At that time, the dude could walk on water. The acceptance and love for him was unbelievable. The media coverage was adoring.
So were the Grammy Awards.
And the winner is Michael Jackson.
Beat it, Michael Jackson.
All the things that people sort of thought was eccentric and they didn't like 5 years later, in 1984, all of it was charming.
Being with Michael at that time was, like I said, it's like being with Christ. People would see him.
People were so moved.
People would see him and start sobbing.
Thriller was already on its way to becoming the biggest-selling LP ever when the era that defined Michael at his pinnacle began on March 25th, 1983, as he unveiled the Moonwalk on the Motown 25th Anniversary Special.
He set the world on fire. When did somebody do a dance that set the world on fire? I was there. I was in the room, and it was like bristling. Everybody was like, oh, my God.
In the summer of '83, Michael decided to do a video for Thriller's title track. He called John Landis, director of An American Werewolf in London.
He was fascinated with the metamorphosis that the character in An American Werewolf in London goes through. And that's what Mike wanted. He wanted to turn into a monster.
Working with his wife, costume designer Deborah Nadulman Landis, John Landis wanted to give Michael his first on-screen girlfriend. Among those he auditioned was a 23-year-old beauty named Ola Ray. Back in 1980, Ola Ray had cited Michael as her favorite singer in her bio for Playboy.
But I'm like, I said, you got to give me this part.
You must have been very convincing, Ola.
I can be sometimes.
When the cameras rolled in October '83, Nancy Griffin was the only journalist on the Thriller set. For this month's issue of Vanity Fair, she wrote about the making of the video, in which she also appears.
I remember very vividly the first night I was on the set of Thriller and I was sitting in the ticket booth. That was one of the nights when I saw him kind of cowering in the corner a little bit and looking around shyly, almost looking as if he wanted somebody to talk to him.
Ola Ray would prove happy to do just that, enjoying herself as John Landis directed Michael to charm her on their dance-infused stroll.
You try to scream, but we only did it twice. It's about a 1.5-minute shot, and you can watch it, and I don't have to do all this cutting around because he's great.
You had to flirt with me. You had to play with me, touch me, and flirt with me. So that was great.
What's that like to have Michael Jackson, playing with you, flirting with you?
What it's like is like, I got to fall in love. And I've never been in love before.
Their relationship would deepen in Michael's trailer.
We would just sit in his dressing room. We'd talk about food, religion, why he couldn't date me. You know, why we couldn't be as intimate as I wanted us to be.
Why couldn't he date you?
Well, he told me that there was someone else that really liked me on the set, and he couldn't cross that line.
But some lines were crossed all the same.
I think things got pretty sexy between Ola and Michael. Some very sweet kind of physical interaction going on between the two of them.
First base? Second base?
I would say I would say second base, maybe third.
Do you think it was farther than he'd ever been with another woman?
I wouldn't say that. I don't think he's that innocent. He's not that innocent. He definitely knew what he was doing, in his own little way.
As seen in the forthcoming book, Michael Jackson, The Making of Thriller, Michael's lengthy sessions with makeup artist Rick Baker were captured by renowned photographer Douglas Kirkland. So was Rock Hudson's visit.
Michael sees Rock Hudson and he just goes limp. He goes over to him and he's looking up to him like that, as this great giant.
None loomed larger than the celebrity John Landis was to meet inside Michael's trailer, late one night in LA's gritty meatpacking district.
And Michael goes, "John, do you know Mrs. Onassis?" And it was like, it was Jackie Kennedy with the pearls.
Thriller became a stupendous success for Michael, one of the best-loved music videos ever, imitated around the world. Yet both John Landis and Ola Ray would sue for royalties they felt they were owed. Even in late '83, there were signs of the issues that would overtake Michael.
I had the feeling then, and I expressed it to John, of real concern about him.
He was in a strange domestic situation. It's a kid who grew up on stage. He was still living at home in his parents' house.
I thought he was very lonely. I knew he was lonely.
When you looked into his eyes, what things did you see?
I saw a child. I saw a child who needed love. It made me cry. Just thinking about him, I don't like to. His personality was just so pure to me.
In January of '84, he was severely burned while taping a Pepsi ad. Then came the Victory Tour.
Shake your body! Shake your body!
Not a Michael Jackson solo tour, but a reunion of the grown-up Jacksons.
Unfortunately, he could not withstand the family pressure, and he agreed to do a tour which he did not want to do. Joe Jackson brought in Don King to promote it.
I compliment Michael as being one of the most astute businessmen for a young man that I've had the pleasure and privilege of meeting. He's a dynamite guy, not only on the stage, but at the boardroom table also. Right on, Michael.
Don King is a fight promoter, not a music promoter, and Don King eventually was marginalized by some of the more professional people that Michael brought in. The organization of the tour was very chaotic.
There were good parts in there, you know, there were some parts he didn't care for.
Ordered tickets, paid $120, can't get them. They just won't show up.
We've asked our promoter to work out a new way of distributing tickets, a way that no longer requires the money for them. I want you to know that I've decided to donate all my money I make from the performance to charity.
According to Michael, it was the first time they ever went on the road and came home with money. All the brothers made a pretty good salary.
I think that Michael's issue really was the money. He was generating such vast amounts of money, and there were so many people and corporate interests that wanted their share.
Thriller was probably the best and worst thing that ever happened to him, because then he spent the next 25 years of his life, you know, in pursuit of something to match that.
Michael's response would be to withdraw even further, to live in isolated splendor, part of a lifelong loneliness that this woman once yearned to end.
We were supposed to have a secret rendezvous. A friend of the family's had contacted me, and we were supposed to meet in Vegas, but it never happened. Now it won't ever happen.
Next, the place where he could withdraw from the world.
It became this kind of haunted mansion that he never left.
How Neverland then became Neverland now. When we come back.
It was Michael Jackson's pricey private playground. But what's happening at Neverland now? The rides and the menagerie are gone, but there's something new going on around the estate. It's a hot property again. Jim Avila takes you on a rare tour of Neverland then and now.
Deep in California's golden Santa Ynez Valley, hidden beyond these gates, past the children frozen in play, is Michael Jackson's over-the-top, once-upon-a-time sanctuary he named Neverland. A private world he designed to live his Peter Pan fantasy as the boy who never grew up.
I think it was the dream of an ideal childhood. Fantasizing vision of what you'd like to be living.
2,700 acres of manicured lawns and a backdrop of oak-filled hillsides. Jackson first saw the property while shooting the music video Say, Say, Say with Paul McCartney, and he fell in love with it. Unable to get it out of his mind, Jackson bought the ranch 4 years later in 1987. It was the height of his popularity, and then manager Frank DeLeo was told to make it happen.
He said, "You don't know how much I want this, but help me get it." I said, "Okay, we have to add some shows." We added 20 shows. He did the 20 shows. He paid cash for the place, and he couldn't wait till the tour was over to get there.
Neverland cost him more than $20 million, and that's before he added his own touches. The 10,000-square-foot Tudor mansion at the center of Neverland overflowed with Michael's jumbled collection of art and toys. Even in his office, he worked surrounded by silent, life-sized friends. And there were plenty of the living around, too. More than 120 staff on $1 million a year payroll, catering to Jackson's every whim. And according to his security chief, all lined up to say goodbye every time he left the ranch for the real world. Mike LaPeroux.
It was the chefs and then the housekeepers and then the security and the fire department and then the zoo animals would then come out, and there would be the elephants there and the giraffes were there and a deer on a leash.
So they just all came to say goodbye.
Yes.
It was sort of part of the ritual.
Right.
Merry Christmas. Have a wonderful day, okay?
Jackson often opened up Neverland's amusement park to groups of children, playing the Pied Piper as he led them to the rides. But what does the Neverland Mansion look like now, a year after Jackson's death? 2020 was invited on a rare tour of the restored and emptied home, now co-owned by a real estate holding company called Colony.
Through this huge door and into the grand entryway is where you see the magnificent restoration going on at Neverland. This is where guests used to be greeted by the life-sized butler who had a tray of cookies in his hand. Their next sight, of course, was this wall, which was covered with a huge picture of Michael Jackson in all his glory.
There were portraits of Michael everywhere as Peter Pan and the Pied Piper. In this painting, he included his friend child star Macaulay Culkin.
As with most families, Michael and his children liked to spend much of their time in the family room and kitchen area. And it was quite a kitchen with all the latest equipment. But despite having a staff of chefs, we're told that Michael mostly liked to eat candy and ice cream. And they happened to use that fryer a lot because he liked fried foods. Also part of his routine was to begin the day in this magnificent little room, where he had breakfast every day. Not only did it have a natural view here, but Michael also had standing orders to the staff to bring his elephant in, to walk it across the panoramic view, just to top it all off. To borrow a couple phrases from the real estate world, Neverland's living room was both sunken and flow-through. When Michael Jackson first bought the property, he kept much of the furniture in it, including a grand piano, which he played here in this corner. But soon, Jackson would replace that with something much more Michael. He imported a toy castle from Germany. And over here was another one of Michael Jackson's most treasured possessions. It was alarmed under glass, the Oscar from Gone with the Wind. It was valued at more than $1 million.
All of Jackson's belongings were gathered for what was to be a grand auction before his death. Now they sit in a warehouse. 2020 obtained these pictures of some of the items, posters, his police motorcycle, even Pinocchio under glass. Their ownership now in dispute. Those are the public areas of Neverland. Down this hall, the private rooms, including the one that got Jackson in so much trouble.
The famous children's gateway to Michael Jackson's master bedroom is gone. So are the metal detectors and the camera that used to be above the door. But the 6 locks are still here, and so is the peephole. Down the 3 steps into the sunken bedroom. And one of the first things you see was one of Michael Jackson's favorite pieces of furniture. It was the throne-like chair he liked to sit on as the king of pop.
These stairs inside the master suite were once lined with rows of dolls. The upstairs bedroom was used as a guest room for visiting children.
The master bath had dramatic views to the outside courtyard and led directly into a walk-in closet, which is different than most closets because Michael Jackson had it filled not just with clothes, but with toys and spangles of all kinds. The second floor, with its dramatic A-frame and solid wood banisters, was all about Michael Jackson's 3 kids.
A bedroom for each and a top-floor classroom for homeschooling. Here's what it looked like in 2003 when the Sheriff's Department took its pictures. Tiny desks and model trains. Out back, the big train is gone, and so is the amusement park. But Jackson's tribute to the cinema, his other artistic obsession, remains.
He built a 50-seat theater, complete with a working snack bar and a popcorn machine. It was the only building on the property that Michael Jackson had a personal hand in designing. After the trial, Neverland was abandoned, and Michael, deeply in debt and clearly ambivalent about keeping it, nearly lost his fantasy for good. He owed $23 million on a loan due in days. His manager, Tome Tome, was scrambling. But his beloved Neverland, what did it look like at that point?
It didn't look like Neverland. The grass is dying, the pond was filthy and dirty, there was no water running. I mean, it was really run down.
Michael Jackson had turned his back on Neverland, as he told 60 Minutes.
I've been back there, but not in my bedroom. I won't live there ever again. I'll visit Neverland. It's a house now, it's not a home anymore. I'll only visit there.
Today, the Jackson family estate is partnered with a Colony real estate company that takes care of the grounds with 30 staff and tens of thousands a month in upkeep, restoring it to its glory days. Soon, it is likely to be put on the market once more, hoping a high roller will see its beauty and history and fall in love as Michael Jackson clearly once was. The final chapter of Neverland soon to be written.
I mean, at first, Neverland seemed like the most gorgeous and charming place. Then it became this kind of haunted mansion that he never left. You know, it's like the dark side of a child's story. You know, underneath the haven, the dungeons may lurk.
Coming up on this second hour of Michael Jackson Afterlife.
He was bone thin, and he grabbed me on the arm and said, "You promised me you wouldn't tell."
Tell what?
What I'm seeing.
For the first time ever, his inner circle speaks out on his darkest thoughts.
He said, "I can't believe the world is doing this to me. I gave everything that I had. I gave them my music, I danced for them, I gave them my life."
His massive debt and denial.
He once told me, "I don't want to be performing Billie Jean when I'm 50 years old."
And how it's all changed now. A fortune pouring in for his children.
Do you think they have any concept how much money they are each worth?
The kids today.
And I'm sort of like a hooligan.
The Michael Jackson of tomorrow.
I was like 9 or 10 and I was saying, "She rocks in the treetops all day long, rocking and bobbing and singing."
And the music he left for always.
Michael Jackson's relationship to the beat, he was the beat, honey. He was the beat. Let's get it right.
And tonight, the fans are pouring out. Michael Jackson, Afterlife. Once again, Chris Cuomo and Elizabeth Vargas.
Good evening and welcome to the second hour of our Michael Jackson anniversary special. We're going to get personal now and begin with three people whose connection to Michael Jackson was hands-on for over 25 years.
Only they saw him as he really was in life and in death, without the glamour, without the makeup. Tonight, Cynthia McFadden has their inside stories. These are the people who prepared Michael Jackson during and after life.
It was the most private of times for the most public of people. Michael Jackson's family and closest friends had come together at Forest Lawn Cemetery to bid him a final farewell. To prepare Jackson, his family had turned to the three people who'd been dressing him and making him up for more than a quarter century: Dennis Tompkins, Michael Bush, and Karen Fay.
Karen, the family called you and asked you to make Michael Jackson up.
Yeah. Nobody else could have.
How did you do it?
It was an honor to do it. It was an honor to do it. I knew how I wanted to look. So I did. First family, first children.
And you all dressed him?
Yeah, the family called and said, "You've worked with Michael for so many years, we need you to do his outfit." And he goes like, "Okay, if he ever needed me, he needs me now."
So what did you pick?
Well, anything I can say at this point, because the family wants to keep it private. There's elements of everything that was his favorite looks over the years. Everything was new.
Were you proud of it?
Yes.
Very,
yeah.
very, very.
It was beautiful.
There had to have been a glove.
No.
He didn't want that.
Well, see, Michael, the glove was Billie Jean. That represented that song. That wasn't...
Not himself.
That's not Michael Jackson. That's the song. That's my performance. That's Billie Jean.
Do you want to put on a jacket?
And these were people who knew the man behind the music.
Michael Bush, you're going to like this. This is you working.
Knew him stripped of the artifice he so cleverly showed the world. Unguarded moments captured by Karen Faye.
I'm not lit properly. This isn't fair.
Oh, that's right. Where's the bounce car?
ABC News paid to license footage and photos from his three friends' private collections. His inner circle was determined Jackson would exit as the world had known him, as a showman.
The work that me and Karen did with Michael at Forest Lawn, I think, bonded us for life.
9 hours, wasn't it?
9 hours.
9 hours. You didn't know you'd be the actual person to dress him one last time.
I never expected, even when we did the costume, to do that. I thought, you know, hand it through a door, I'm done.
And then I assisted you.
And I think the hardest thing is, I mean, they asked me to help. Everyone's gone. We have to get him in the coffin. So I had to help pick him up and place him in the coffin. And to me, it's like, well, I got to do this for my best friend.
The final touch, Tompkins designed this crown to bid the king of pop farewell.
May I pick it up?
Yes.
It looks like ermine down here. It's not real, is it?
Faux.
Faux ermine.
Faux ermine.
It's a show crown.
Show crown.
For perhaps the greatest showman of them all. You can't help but think he would have loved seeing his children proudly carry that crown.
When the casket was brought in at Forest Lawn into the service, Prince and Paris and Blanket lifted and put it on the center of the flowers on the coffin.
Well, that must have been a moment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
This is the first time Tompkins, Faye, and Bush have talked about their employer and friend.
So, Karen, tell me about the first time you met him.
I met him in the summer of 1982. It's just a little bit softer.
She'd been called in to do his hair and makeup for the cover of Thriller, which would become the biggest selling album of all time. And he'd brought along a surprise, a baby tiger.
I was more fascinated with that tiger than I was with him. So I think he really enjoyed that my attention wasn't totally focused on him.
In fact, a little-known fact, you flashed him that first day.
Oh, okay. I undid the top of my jeans and I just flashed him the top because I happened to have worn some tiger underwear that day. And he went, ah! And he was just so embarrassed by that. And I quickly buttoned it up, but I think that's why he called me back the next job.
You think?
I think so.
He liked people who had a sense of humor.
Yes, absolutely.
He also liked people who had a sense of style. For more than 2 decades, the majority of Jackson's most memorable outfits came out of the workshop run by Dennis Tompkins.
If you had to sum up his style, what was it?
Liberace has gone to war.
Liberace has gone to war.
Liberace,
And I said that's pretty good.
His genius as an artist is unquestioned, but we wanted to know about the persistent rumors that followed him.
There's been a lot of talk about whether or not he was abusing drugs. Nobody was in a more intimate position than the three of you to know. Kind of popular wisdom was that after the Pepsi commercials, where his hair caught on fire, he had to take painkillers.
That's not true.
That's not true.
That's not true because that's not where it initially started.
Faye insists Jackson's use of prescription drugs began in 1993, 9 years after the Pepsi commercial.
Just before we went on tour for Dangerous, he had an operation in order to help the scarring. But he didn't have enough time to heal. We were getting on a plane and going right to Bangkok. So in order to keep going, he started using some painkillers because it was very painful when the nerve endings are severed.
Do you know what he was taking?
Oh, no. No, I don't.
It wasn't out in the open. It wasn't.
No.
But it was while they were in Bangkok, Jackson's world exploded.
Police sources say the charges involve a 13-year-old boy.
Amidst reports that California authorities were investigating him for sexually abusing a 13-year-old boy.
So now we're talking physical pain, and now we're talking emotional pain.
The day that came out, he was stepping on stage in front of like 80,000 people.
Jackson went through with the performance, but the price was high.
It was devastating because he had to go out every day in front of a world and the media who was telling everybody
that
he was a pedophile, but he still went out and had to face everybody.
Aided, Faye says, by painkillers.
It gave him some sort of ability to get through it.
But even then, Jackson couldn't sleep, say Bush and Faye. And the combined toll of the allegations and touring was showing, at least backstage.
You have to understand his adrenaline was so intense. Sometimes it would take him 2 days.
2 days to go to sleep.
For his adrenaline just to come down from one show.
In 1994, Jackson settled out of court with his accuser, but nearly a decade later, yet another boy came forward, also alleging sexual abuse.
The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone.
That remark from a British documentary was so incendiary, it fueled Jackson's prosecution.
You say the word bed, a lot of people think sexual, and that was the farthest thing from Michael's mind. I mean, we would go do an award show, you come back, everyone jumped on the bed, with 15 people on the bed watching the show or cartoons or whatever movie he had to show.
You never saw, you never heard anything in the course of a 25-year relationship that made you think that Michael Jackson was a pedophile?
No.
Nothing.
No. Nothing.
I absolutely feel I would have seen something over the years, but not a thing.
Not guilty. A dramatic victory for Michael Jackson.
And after a 3.5-month trial, Jackson was acquitted, though the taint of the accusation continued to linger. Tonight, for the first time, his friends reveal how devastating the trial was for him. They were there at Neverland every morning getting him ready. Faye says the routine was always the same, beginning at 3 a.m.
Before I washed his hair, we actually knelt down on the ground. And he put his arms around me, and I put my arms around him, and he would put his head right here and weep. And we would pray for God to help us and for people to know the truth. And then we'd get up and wipe our tears, and I would wash his hair.
Do you think he thought he was going to be convicted, Karen?
He didn't know. I mean, it was so vicious. I had to walk the red carpet into that courtroom every day in front of all the cameras.
And every day for that long walk, he had a new outfit, designed by his old pals, delivered every morning at 6 a.m., a boost for his morale.
And after you got him dressed, it's like, we love you. No, I love you more.
When we come back, new, intimate details from his final weeks from those who were at his side.
Did you think that he was vulnerable enough that he might die?
Yes.
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 In his art, Michael Jackson played repeatedly with the idea of metamorphosis, from Thriller to Black or White, to Ghosts, where he becomes a middle-aged white guy. And looking back, it seems as if Michael Jackson viewed his own face as yet another canvas, another opportunity to explore change. For the first time tonight, we talked to the woman who knew his face almost as well as he did, Karen Faye, his makeup artist for more than 25 years.
Of course, stage makeup is one thing, but makeup on men in life is looked at as very peculiar, especially during the trial, when he's wearing eyeliner and what appears to be lipstick.
It's very sensitive for me to even talk about, because these are things that are very, very private. He didn't like the line that was drawn between what's allowed for men and what's allowed for women. He really was very androgynous in the sense that he just took whatever is available to enhance himself as art.
So in some ways, people have said that he saw himself as an artistic canvas.
Absolutely. That's the explanation also for the plastic surgery. He was always trying to perfect everything.
Plastic surgeons have looked at his face and said that the nose actually became almost non-functioning because of the repeated plastic surgeries. That's not true. He didn't have to wear a nose prosthesis?
No, absolutely
not. A lot of people believe it. So let's
you know what it was? It was the tape that he used to wear on his nose, and everybody thought that was...
Why tape?
Because I guess after plastic surgery, it keeps it in form, or else it would expand.
Because a lot of people think he went too far. You never said to him, Michael...
I thought he was beautiful, and I would always tell him I thought he was beautiful. Personally, I think it went a little too far, but like I never, ever, because I understood it.
Faye says she saw Jackson announce his new tour on television on March 5th of last year. And soon got a call from him asking if she'd team up with him once again for their 4th tour together.
From the time you first talked to him about going back to work in March to May, did you see a change?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
I think he was frightened. Of? Being judged again. He said during the trial, I can't believe the world is doing this to me. He said, I gave everything that I had. I gave them my music, I danced for them, and this is what I get in return.
And not since the trial, she says, had she seen such fear in Jackson's eyes.
And when it really got down to standing up in front of an audience, all that fear, all that doubt, all that cruelty that people directed at him, he was afraid. He didn't want to go through that again.
When you looked at Michael Jackson's face at the end, it looked sad.
He was very sad.
He was starting to lose weight.
Oh, he wasn't sleeping, and he was losing weight drastically. The week before he died, probably about 15 pounds, I would say.
And he didn't have 15 pounds to lose.
No, no. In fact, when I met him in March, one of my very first concerns was that I thought he was too thin to really be able to do a show. But, you know, I thought, oh, plenty of time. Once he starts working out, getting on the dance floor, he's going to eat, he's going to build himself up again. But I did tell Kenny Ortega, I said, Kenny, we really have to get some weight on him.
Director of choreography.
And that was a main concern.
So there was a lot of pressure going into this.
A lot of pressure.
This was going to be his first major appearance since the trial.
A lot more shows than he wanted or agreed to do.
And the first time his kids were going to see it.
Yes.
So there was a lot on the line.
And Jackson wanted to top himself. Better dancing, better costumes. Even the 3D movie is part of the show.
You also feel that he was taking drugs at that time? Medication of some sort?
I really can't really go here because of impending trial and things like that. So we can't, this is kind of like a difficult area.
Well, were you concerned about him?
I was extremely concerned with Michael's well-being. I was very concerned with his well-being.
You'd seen him in dicey situations before. Were you more concerned than you'd ever been?
Absolutely, a lot more concerned.
He was like bone thin, and he'd grab me on the arm and say, you promised me you wouldn't tell.
Tell what?
What I'm seeing.
Did you tell anybody?
Absolutely.
What did you say?
I was talking to the people who had the power to do something about it.
What were your fears?
I feared that Michael was physically unable to do the shows in his condition.
Did you think that he was vulnerable enough that he might die?
Yes.
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 There was just these telltale signs. When is someone going to pay attention? Because to me it was blatant.
What was blatant?
The way he was like on stage rehearsing.
What was different about it?
A lot of start-stops. Usually when we did a music video with Michael, they'd load the camera full of film, they would run it until it ran out. You didn't do 2 bars of the song and stop. That was Michael's energy. He fed off of what was going on.
He didn't have his usual stamina.
No, and then you start speaking up, like you said, to the powers that be, and it just seemed like it was falling on deaf ears, or we'll fix that later, or there's more, something else that seemed like it was more important.
Because when you see the video that was put out of the rehearsal of the This Is It concert, it sure looks like Michael Jackson's on top of that world.
Okay.
It's great editing.
It isn't the reality that we're seeing.
Absolutely not. Even if you look at the songs, the way they're edited, he has 3 different outfits on for one song. And most, they were taking bits and pieces from different rehearsal dates to be able to put it together to make it look like he got through a song. But we really didn't get through a whole song. I think we got through 2 ballads all together.
And sure enough, here in the number Smooth Criminal, 5 outfits for the same song. But ABC News spoke to 3 of Jackson's dancers, who in the final rehearsal before he died, say Jackson was going all out.
Criminal.
And that they were shocked by his death. As for his weight loss, the concert's producers, AEG, say they too were concerned and hired someone to monitor his eating. But Faye and Bush still insist Jackson was nowhere near ready.
I didn't think he could do a show.
And this was not the Michael Jackson that you would work with for 25 years.
No. He didn't have the control that he was used to having.
On the 25th of June last year, Karen Faye was waiting for Jackson at the Staples Center to begin rehearsals when she got the call she dreaded. Michael Jackson had been rushed to the hospital.
Michael Jackson was brought here in full cardiac arrest
and is now in a coma at the UCLA.
When did you find out?
Kenny kind of instructed us to keep going and rehearsing and getting ready, do what we're supposed to do. We're not sure what's going on right now. Let's just carry on as usual. I was headed back to my room, my makeup room, and Kenny came out of his office. And he put his arms around me and held me up and whispered in my ear, "He's gone, we lost him." And my knees just collapsed.
Do you think Michael Jackson needed to die? Do you think that was inevitable, or could he have been saved?
I think if people paid attention, we'd still have him.
Next, what we do have, the children he left behind, where they are today.
Yeah, and I'm sort of like a hooligan.
Who needs the paparazzi when their videos are turning up on YouTube? When we come back.
After Michael Jackson was accused of sexually molesting children, some people found it troubling that he went on to have 3 children of his own. But as it turns out, he was an attentive and loving father. How are his children doing now, living at their grandmother's house? And what wise plans did he set in place to protect their future? There are images of Michael Jackson's children that shocked the world. The singer dangling his baby son out of a hotel window, forcing his children to wear bizarre masks out in public. But perhaps the one that will endure longest is that of Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris, speaking at his memorial service.
And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
Paris has such a love for her father, and it just touches her heart to know that he will no longer be with her.
Daddy has been the best.
What was it like to be there, to see Paris break down talking about how much she loved her daddy?
It was an emotional moment. It wasn't easy.
Frank Cascio was a close friend of Michael's for decades, sharing vacations and holidays with the king of pop. He has seen Michael's children many times since their father's death.
Those 3 kids, it's their father. That's all they knew. That was their world.
Prince, I wish for you to learn about perseverance and confidence and the true meaning of success, which is love.
It's like somebody took their world away from them.
It'll get better with time. That pain will still always be there. But I don't think it's heavy.
Michael Jackson's first son, Prince, was born in February of 1997 to Jackson and his second wife, Debbie Rowe. When Barbara Walters sat down with Michael 7 months later, his joy was obvious.
Do you like being a father?
I love it.
Are you very involved with him?
Yes. Just hearing my voice, he knows. He knows it's me, and he sees me, and his eyes light up. When he's crying, to keep him from crying, you have to do one thing.
What?
I have to stand in front of him and dance.
Really?
Yes. And he stops crying. His tears turn to laughter, and he starts happy. He smiles.
Do you want more children?
Yes.
Just months later, Michael's daughter, Paris, was born. And in 2002, Jackson welcomed another son known as Blanket. Michael assumed sole custody and formed a powerful bond with all 3 children. It's very striking on the birthday videos that were taken before Michael died. The affection, the level of affection that all three kids have for him.
And I love you so much.
And they did, and he loved them. That's what kept him going, those children.
I mean, they was, Mike called them the full buddies, you know, and that's what they were. So there was no one closer.
So close that some wondered whether Michael's embrace was too tight.
First verse one more time.
You are my daddy, my only daddy.
Pop candle.
At many of those birthday parties, the Jackson Four were the only ones celebrating because no other children were invited.
All this food, all this cake. I'd be like, well, where are all the kids? We thought we was coming to a big party. You got a magician, a clown, and you're only entertaining 3 kids.
Michael also homeschooled his children and worried obsessively about their safety. In the Living with Michael Jackson documentary with Martin Bashir, Prince and Paris were filmed wearing elaborate masks. Michael did not want their identities revealed because he feared they would be kidnapped.
He was also scared that his children were going to be poisoned, and he was worried when they were at Neverlands that coyotes were going to come and snatch them away. And because of that, they were incredibly isolated.
Since Michael Jackson's death, the children have emerged from their lives of isolation. In accordance with their father's wishes, they live with Michael's mother, Catherine, in this Encino home. The family says the process of healing has been steady but slow.
Paris constantly says she misses her dad, and she wished he were there with her every single day.
In a newspaper interview published this week, Catherine Jackson revealed that Paris has turned her room into a virtual shrine to her father, and that each child spends hours every day listening to Michael's music.
I know how much those children are going to miss their father. They're coping with it. You know, they cope with it.
Some are concerned that 80-year-old Catherine is overwhelmed by caring for Michael's 3 young children and several of their cousins as well. In March, the LA Department of Child and Family Services investigated reports that Blanket Jackson's cousin, Jafar, had tried to taser him. Do you think 7 kids was too much, perhaps, to have anybody looking after?
Let's put it this way. Catherine has raised 9 children of her own. You know, certain things possibly need to change moving forward, but those kids are in really good hands.
Do you think they should be allowed at some point to go to school instead of being homeschooled?
Absolutely. It's in the plans for them to go to school, and I think they're looking forward to it.
They're able to go out. They even go out with Catherine to the grocery store sometimes. They go to karate lessons. They go to Universal Studios and go to theme parks. And they live a much different life.
Please welcome Prince and Paris Jackson, everybody.
In January, Prince and Paris accepted a Grammy Award on their father's behalf.
Through all his songs, his message was simple: love.
The children continued their coming out party in these videos, recently posted on YouTube. Paris performs a rap song,
I'm sort of like a hooligan,
while Blanket acts out a Star Wars skit.
Hey, John, made coffee, Father. Get that down, Father.
It was the kind of publicity Michael had hoped they would never have. In fact, he hoped they would never follow him onto the stage. Why do you think Michael was opposed to any of his children ever going into the music business?
I don't think he wanted any of his children to have the life that he had, because it wasn't easy.
In details of a family trust made public just weeks ago, Michael Jackson left the bulk of his estate to his children. He was careful not to give them too much too soon. Each child must be 40 years old to inherit all the money due them, at least $33 million each. Do you think they have any concept how much money they are each worth?
I don't think it's important to them. I think what's important to them is the family around them. And
No, I think more from the aspect of being on guard against people trying to take advantage of them.
I will say this: Prince is very, very smart, beyond his years, and he knows what's going on.
All 3 children will have to be savvy in the years ahead. They face many of the same hurdles their father did, surrounded by the promise and the pitfalls of massive wealth, and pursued everywhere by paparazzi.
They don't really like to be photographed still. But you can't keep every camera away.
Just yesterday, these pictures were taken at a family holiday in Hawaii.
Do you think it's possible that they can ever have a somewhat normal life?
I don't think, being the children of Michael Jackson, I don't think they'll ever have a completely normal life.
Next, the money problems the children never knew and making sure they never would by facing his fears for one final comeback.
He once told me, I don't want to be performing Billie Jean when I'm 50 years old.
When we come back.
In a life full of surprises, Michael Jackson's finances stand out. How could a man so rich be so broke when he died? Nearly $500 million in debt. Where did it all go? And why is he rolling in it now? Jim Avila follows the money.
Michael Jackson lives anew in an upcoming video game. And he's alive again in a new Cirque du Soleil stage production.
Cirque du Soleil and Michael Jackson.
The DVD of Jackson's This Is It concert movie is a marketing smash. A treasure trove of unreleased music is on the horizon. You can buy a King of Pop ringtone. His estate has sold $5 million worth since his death. Today, Michael Jackson is just about as hot as ever. In the year since he died, SoundScan reports that U.S. fans bought more albums than in his previous 8 years combined.
It was an amazing year for him.
Author Richard Sicklow says when it comes to money, his lost years are over.
He didn't work for nearly a decade, and so 2001 was his last studio album.
Jackson had made mounds of money in the 1980s, but as his popularity dropped and the money stopped coming in, it was still going out by the boatload.
I kind of, cringed at times.
His former publicist, Stuart Backerman, witnessed some of Jackson's legendary shopping excess, but says it wasn't always what it seemed. Take this spree that appeared in the Living with Michael Jackson documentary with Martin Bashir.
But they were all for show.
Did we get those? I like those.
He felt like a lot of celebrities, but in Michael's case, because he was the biggest of them all, that he had to come off like he was an extravagant spender.
He did sometimes send things back, but there's no arguing. Michael liked to spend.
He didn't really take money seriously because he really deeply believed that money would never be an issue for the rest of his life.
The result of that attitude, money flew out the door of Neverland, which cost an estimated $600,000 a month to maintain. One former advisor claimed Jackson spent $8 million a year on plane charters, antiques, paintings, and other personal expenses.
At the lowest point, he was spending $10 to $15 million a year more than he was bringing in.
Did he have the savings to make that up?
It's as though you have, you take out a credit card and borrow the max on that credit card to pay off another credit card. He just did it on a gigantic scale.
Another huge expense? The lawsuits, settled with multi-million-dollar payouts, the most prominent with boys who accused him of sexual abuse. One child was paid nearly $20 million to settle his case. A second boy took him to criminal trial, and the legal costs there were large too. He stiffed his top lawyer for more than $300,000 till the day he died. But in an interview with Jesse Jackson, Michael denied financial troubles.
Michael, are you broke?
That's not true at all. It's just one of their many schemes to embarrass me and to just drag me through mud. This is sensationalized kind of gossip.
Even though Michael Jackson was found not guilty, the bad publicity hurt record sales, and his assets carried heavy mortgages, including the Beatles catalog and his own music rights. He owed upwards of $450 million, and creditors were at the door. Utility bills and staff unpaid.
As Michael, I just can't do this anymore.
Mike LaPerouse ran security for Jackson.
He apologized to me several times about not being able to pay me, that he would make it up to me. And I think he was very embarrassed.
And then the worst happened. 2 years ago, Michael Jackson faced foreclosure. He could not make the balloon payment on his once beloved Neverland.
It will be very embarrassing for Michael Jackson to lose his home in foreclosure.
Dr. Tome Tome, a very private businessman, was brought in by Jermaine Jackson at the last minute to help save the ranch and all of Jackson's personal property inside from foreclosure.
You've got 14 days left to pay how much money?
$23 million plus.
And how much did he have in the bank?
He didn't have anything close to that number.
Tome put together an 11th-hour deal with an investment firm called Colony Capital to pay off the loan. So Michael and his advisors turned to his other debts and making a future for his kids.
He once told me, I don't want to be performing Billie Jean when I'm 50 years old.
But his manager told him he had to stop resisting a comeback and perform again.
I said, Michael, listen, if you wanted to control your own destiny, you have to go back to work because you need to make money.
The This Is It show in London was the solution. Randy Phillips of AEG, the company in charge of the 50-show tour, was shocked at how quickly the tickets sold out.
When we cut it off on the public on sale at 50 shows, there were enough people. There were over, I think, 225 to 240,000 people still queued up on Ticketmaster, and the ticketing agencies were selling tickets. So we probably could have done 200 shows.
What would that have meant for Michael Jackson?
He would have netted probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 or $60 million for that run.
Phillips says This Is It was actually just the beginning. An international tour that could have brought in as much as $500 million to Jackson was in the works. But Michael was already spending his cash advance.
There was a house in Bel Air, and the owner wanted like $90 million for it. I said, Michael, you know, you could live very beautifully in Bel Air in a $15 million house.
In fact, only in death have Jackson's finances become solid. And for the first time in years, more money is coming in than is going out. Former manager and the man who calls himself Jackson's alter ego, Frank DeLeo, says that may sound like good news, but it came at too high a price.
I'm sure that's the way his children and his mother feel. All this money coming in, give me Michael.
Next, today's youngest superstars, taking what they learned from Jackson and making it their very own. When we come back.
We can never see Michael Jackson perform again live, but we can see his influence on some of the hottest acts on the music scene today. He was their inspiration, their mentor, their own American Idol. Here's Chris Conley.
At last year's memorial service for Michael Jackson, this was R&B megastar Usher, hushing the crowd with a performance of Michael's own Gone Too Soon, touching the casket.
It was not rehearsed for me to go down and touch his casket, but I just felt compelled to do so. This is a moment.
One day, come one night.
I cried a lot before I hit the stage.
Come too soon.
But I managed to make it through it, and I'm happy that I was able to do it.
Now 31, a solo artist since he was 15, Usher's long been inspired by the king of pop.
Man, as a performer, I'd say every bit of who I am on stage is somewhat a product of what I saw. I mean, who wasn't a fan of Michael Jackson as a kid?
Exactly. Which is why across the pop spectrum, Michael's influence can still be found today. Not merely in the many disparate performers who've covered his songs, but in the sheer scope of their ambition.
There's basically almost no pop R&B singer who I've seen whose stage style, their lighting gear,
You got it.
their view of how they should take the stage is not influenced by Michael. There hasn't been a new template for how to be large.
What sort of things did you learn from him that you would later incorporate into your own work?
Magic. The magic of understanding the moment. Captivating a crowd, understanding what he calls the sizzle.
That moment he would stand in front of the crowd and just
take it in. The one greater thing in the moment is the anticipation of the moment. They don't want it right away. You gotta make them wait a little bit for it, you know?
There's also the rising star Usher's been mentoring. 16-year-old Justin Bieber, whose live show has a nod to Michael's "Wanna Be Startin' Something." People would say, well, Michael Jackson was way before Justin's time.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't really know anything about Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
But you studied him.
For sure, yeah. One of the first songs I took serious and sang was Rockin' Robin. I was like 9 or 10 and I was singing, she rocks in the treetops all day long, rocking and bobbing and singing his song.
Did you have like a hairbrush in your hand while you're doing that?
No, just a fake mic, just like. And, you know, after I started doing this and just watching playback of his videos and just watching, you know, how in control he is of everything.
For Justin, who's on the road for his first big concert tour, that control was one of the revelations of last year's This Is It documentary.
Don't do that one yet? No. It should be simple.
After watching that, I realized, you know, I have to be in more control of what's going on because everything that everybody does around me is all reflected on me. And same with Michael.
It's not just A-listers who are testaments to Michael's iconic stature. These young dancers who've been cast to back up Michael in This Is It were influenced by him in a new way, through his approval and affection.
I love you all, and we're family. Just know that. We're family.
I remember we would come in to rehearsal and Michael would be there and we'd line up, like some little kids would line up and wait to give him a hug. Like we all wanted to give Michael his hug for the day, just to have that little moment with him, you know. So a lot of artists don't take the time to even say hello to you, let alone give you your hug.
You talked about Michael as almost a father figure in your life, Chris. What did that mean?
Well, growing up, I didn't really have a father of my own. And you know how you look up to people and they're your mentor? He was like that to me.
They watched wide-eyed whenever the consummate performer took over.
He's singing up on the stage. He says, see that girl? And he, boom, points over at me. I had no idea. He knew I was watching, and I was like, he caught me. Like, I'm supposed to be backstage, but it was just so exciting that he was aware of me being there, and I was kind of giddy like a little girl. I was like, oh my gosh, just so excited.
He loved putting them out there, and he would give them opportunity. He wasn't the kind of person on stage that would say, oh, don't do that, you're doing too much. He loved it.
And I'm sure in the presence of Michael, they were a little abashed.
No, you can't be abashed next to Michael Jackson. You better get on it.
He brought up the new generations of artists through their dance and singing and their whole image. Everybody wants to be like Mike.
Even for someone who'd made it big, a word from Michael meant the world.
Everybody wants to feel special, you know. To be able to hear from Michael, that is your certification that you have made it. You definitely are headed down the right road.
What have we done to the world? Look what we've done.
You could hear and feel the emotion in everything he did. There's not a lot of people that you can say that you just feel it when you listen to him.
As a dancer, what was his relationship to the beat? Was he always on top of it? Did he linger behind and catch up? What made it so irresistible to watch him?
Michael Jackson's relationship to the beat, he was the beat, honey. He was the beat. Let's get it right. He was the beat.
And for the scores of performers who've emulated him, for the thousands whose careers he inspired, and for the countless millions moved by the 4 decades of his pop artistry, the beat goes on.